She didn't scream, she didn't cry, she didn't run. Right after the shove, in front of a packed auditorium, she simply picked up the crown and threw it straight at the feet of the one who had pushed her. It was the prom night everyone thought would end like every other year. But this time, a girl dared to say no to silence before we continue the story. If you've ever witnessed a moment of injustice and no one spoke up, please like this video and comment below to let us know where you're watching from. Your support fuels us to keep telling the stories that make society look at itself more closely. Now, get ready for a prom night no one saw coming. The soft golden stage lights cast a glow across her dress, making the glitter along its fabric shimmer like ripples on water. As the old prom song shifted key, Noelle Carter stepped down from the podium, still holding her bouquet and the silver crown tilted loosely atop her hair. She smiled, but had never felt so alone. Below the stage, amid a sea of people raising phones and filming, Brandon Keller pushed his way forward through the crowd. Jacket unbuttoned, tie loosened, eyes cold. No one thought it was strange. Brandon had always been the center of everything at Maplewood. Maybe another prank. A late congratulations. He extended his hand as if to shake hers. Noelle paused, hesitating for half a second. Their eyes met. Her fingers clenched slightly around the bouquet. And then, both of Brandon's hands shoved her square in the chest. It wasn't an accident. It wasn't a stumble. It was a deliberate shove. Noelle staggered back 2 steps. Her high heels slipped on the glossy stage floor. One foot nearly missed the edge of the platform. The entire room, hundreds of people, fell utterly silent. No one moved fast enough to react. The music kept playing, but what had just happened tore prom night into 2 separate realities. A few gasps echoed from the far end of the hall. One girl raised her hands to her mouth. Phone cameras shifted upward and froze on the moment. Noelle, motionless beneath the cold white spotlight, bouquet slipping from her hand, red petals scattering across the floor like splattered blood. Brandon laughed, a dry, shallow, mocking sound. "Relax, I was just kidding." No one laughed. No teacher stepped forward. No one called Brandon's name. No one shielded the girl who had nearly fallen at the center of the stage. But Noelle kept standing. She didn't turn away. She didn't cry. She didn't shrink the way they expected her to. She just bent down, picked up the silver crown, held it in her hand for a moment, and threw it directly at Brandon's feet. The metal hitting the floor rang out sharp and final, like the crack of a gavel. "You want this crown? Then take it." Brandon froze. The entire auditorium held its breath. Noelle turned on her heel and walked off the stage. No more words, no apology, no bowing her head. Behind her, a silence stretched on. So long it became suffocating. It was all that remained after a shove no one expected to be real. But to truly understand the weight of that moment, we have to go back to the beginning. To a girl who had once fallen, but no one noticed. And to an ordinary day. That turned out to be the day history was made. That morning, the skies over Willowbrook were misty and colder than usual. A soft breeze swept through the back hallways of the school, rustling the crimson maple leaves of April, one of which pressed itself against the glass window of a classroom. Noelle Carter stepped onto the campus of Maplewood High, holding a lukewarm cup of coffee in one hand. A charcoal grey jacket hung over her shoulders, covering the prom dress neatly folded inside her backpack. No one noticed her, and she preferred it that way. Every one of Noelle's footsteps seemed calculated to make no sound. Not because she was timid, but because she had once learned how to become invisible. Ever since what happened at her last school, since the day she was pushed down the steps and no one turned back to look. Since the time a teacher told her, "Maybe you should try being a little more modest, Noelle. You make her feel threatened." Noelle had stayed silent from that day on. She transferred at the start of senior year. Maplewood wasn't anything special, but to her it was a safe beginning. A place where no one knew what had happened before. A place where she could go to class without being followed to the gates, without being cornered at her locker. And she did everything right to protect that fragile peace. Avoided arguments. Never sat near the popular kids. Kept a perfect GPA. smiled just enough not to be labeled stuck up. Today was prom. She hadn't planned on going. Truthfully, she hated prom. Hated the loud music, hated the blinding lights, hated the feeling of pretending to be joyful at an event that never felt like it belonged to her. But Riley Thompson and Ava Jameson, the only two friends she'd made since coming to Maplewood, wouldn't let her say no. You survived a whole year without getting dragged into drama. You deserve one night in a beautiful dress. No one remembers what song played at prom. They only remember who walked in and made the room go silent. That line haunted Noelle more than she cared to admit. She didn't say it out loud, but in her heart she knew. She didn't want to be remembered. Because once people remembered, they could also target. And she wasn't sure she was strong enough to survive that again. The anonymous messages from sophomore year still lingered in her memory. So did the look on her mother's face when she found out her daughter had been shoved down the stairs, and no one was punished. You know why they didn't defend you, right, Noelle? She hadn't answered, and since then, she never had. Tonight, the Maplewood High Gym was no longer the place where students sweated over track drills or basketball games. It had been transformed into something else entirely, shimmering, surreal, almost unreal. Soft golden lights intertwined with strands of string lights hung like a glowing net. Clusters of silver balloons floated like clouds. One corner held a refreshment table covered in white cloth, sprinkled with confetti and sparkling plastic cups. And the DJ? Still fumbling to mix early 2000s throwbacks with a bit of modern trap beats. Awkward, but just enough to get the crowd swaying. Noelle Carter stood silently at the threshold, as if staring into a dream she wasn't sure she had permission to step into. Tonight, you are a legal citizen of this kingdom. Go on, princess? Riley Thompson teased, gently tucking a loose strand of hair behind Noelle's ear. They don't know it yet, but they're lucky to witness you in that dress. Ava Jameson said it plainly, without sarcasm. Her voice was always soft, but sharp. Noelle smiled but didn't reply. Her eyes kept scanning the room, an old instinct, looking for exits, for danger in someone's gaze, for anyone staring too long. She still couldn't quite believe she had made it here. Her sapphire prom dress hugged her figure just right, with a modest neckline and off-the-shoulder sleeves. Her hair was loosely pinned up, with a few natural curls tumbling down her cheeks like they'd been sketched in soft pencil. And then she stepped into the crowd, into the light. No whistles, no dramatic gasps like in the movies, but she knew she had been seen. A few heads turned, a few phone cameras lit up, and at the far end, near the back wall of the gym, Brandon Keller set down his cup of soda. He was watching her, no scowl, no smirk, just staring, steady and calculating. Brandon Keller leaned against a light post near the snack table, slowly spinning an empty plastic cup in his hand, his eyes locked on the stage. He didn't smile, didn't speak, didn't mingle, which was highly unusual for Brandon, because this used to be his domain. For 3 years of high school, Brandon had been Maplewood's unofficial poster boy. His face on the back-to-school banners, MC for every pep rally, lead vocalist in the boys' choir. And most importantly, the son of Margot Keller, the school's biggest donor. The new sports field, the LED lighting system, even the outdoor projectors, all bore the Keller Foundation logo at the bottom of the donation plaques. Brandon had always been used to standing in the spotlight. Until this year. And until the quiet presence of a girl he never quite understood. Noelle Carter. Noelle never tried to stand out. She didn't join drama club, didn't campaign for student council, didn't play sports. And yet somehow, everywhere she walked, people remembered her more than they did Brandon. Brandon remembered the exact moment he first took notice of her. October, British literature class. He cracked a half joke, half slight. She writes essays like she's running an editorial column or something. Noelle didn't look up, didn't blush, didn't react like others usually did. She simply kept writing and replied, her voice quiet but cold. Maybe if you spent more time solving the actual assignments instead of trying to pick fights, you'd stop being the problem everyone tiptoes around. The class fell silent. She hadn't yelled, hadn't been rude, but her reply hit like a white-gloved slap. And from that day on, Brandon began to pay attention to her. Not the kind of attention born from interest, but the kind born from a bruised ego. The kind that refuses to forget it was wounded. As the spotlight shifted, the mic let out a soft burst of static, followed by the excited voice of the male MC. And this year's prom royalty goes to Noelle Carter. For a brief moment, Noelle thought she had misheard. She was still standing in the crowd, not yet moving. Her dress hadn't swayed, her feet hadn't stepped forward. Only the stunned faces of Riley and Ava turned sharply toward her, mouths open, before both screamed, "Go!" Noelle walked onto the stage like someone in a dream. She couldn't hear the background music, couldn't see anyone beyond the blinding lights in front of her, could feel nothing but the pounding of her heartbeat, loud and fast, like fireworks inside her ears. She had never imagined they would call her name, not because she wasn't worthy, but because she had taught herself never to expect anything meant for her. A teacher smiled gently as they placed the delicate silver crown on her head. A student council member handed her a bouquet of deep red roses. Applause erupted from all directions. She bowed her head, smiled, followed the script, but inside, Noelle was trembling. How did I end up here? Why, would they choose me? She hadn't run a campaign, hadn't asked for votes, hadn't passed out stickers or flyers like the other girls, and part of her still quietly scoffed at the whole idea of decorative titles. But the moment that crown touched her hair, it was heavier than she expected, not because of the metal, but because of the meaning. Amid the applause, her eyes drifted instinctively across the gym and locked onto Brandon Keller. He stood at the edge of the stage, leaning against a light post, lips pressed into a thin line, not smiling, not clapping. That gaze, not angry, not cold, but something else, as if he were measuring her, weighing her worth. Noelle suddenly felt her throat dry up. Memories surged back like water rushing through a broken dam. She remembered eyes like that, from her old school, the casual shoves disguised as accidents, the anonymous texts, the laughter behind her back, and the feeling of being lifted onto a stage, only to be dragged down. She asked herself, is tonight just another setup? Am I walking straight into a trap, designed to knock me down again? But then the music started, a slow pop ballad, the same prom song they played every year, like a masquerade mask for the night. She swallowed the knot in her throat, tightened her grip on the bouquet, and stepped off the stage, unaware that the one waiting to pull her down was just a few steps away. Noelle stepped down from the stage, bouquet still clutched in her arms, the crown slightly tilted atop her head. She was scanning the crowd, looking for Riley and Ava, when a figure blocked her path. Brandon Keller. His eyes gleamed with something strange. On his lips, a crooked smile, sweet like syrup, but tinged with the cold scent of metal. "Congratulations, Your Majesty." His voice dragged slightly, light as a joke, but no one laughed. A few students turned their heads. To an outsider, it might have looked like a simple congratulatory moment. Noelle nodded slowly, intending to walk past. But right then, Brandon shoved both hands into her chest. A real shove. Not accidental, not a stumble, deliberate. Noelle staggered. One of her heels slipped slightly. She stopped just inches from the edge of the stage. The bouquet nearly fell from her hands. The entire gymnasium went still. No music, no voices, just a few faint gasps of, "Oh my God." Brandon sneered, "Relax, it was just a joke." No one laughed. No teacher stepped forward. No one pulled him away. But Noelle stayed standing. Her gaze turned suddenly cold. She reached up, removed the crown from her head, and threw it onto the floor, landing at Brandon's feet. "You want it that badly? Then take it." The metal hit the ground with a small but unmistakable clang. The whole room held its breath. Brandon froze, and Noelle turned away, walking slowly out of the spotlight, as if she had just stepped out of a trap that had been buried long ago. The sound of the crown hitting the floor still echoed in Noelle's mind as she walked past Brandon. She didn't look back, didn't ask why, didn't wait for anyone to defend her. Riley and Ava rushed toward her from the far corner of the room. "Are you okay?" Ava gasped. "Did he actually shove you?" Riley grabbed Noelle's shoulders, eyes already red. Noelle didn't answer. She just took a deep breath. The bouquet was still in her hands, but the roses were crushed, bruised from how tightly she'd been gripping them. In her head, a different voice whispered, once again, in front of everyone. And still, they said nothing. Just like back then. Just like the day she was pushed down the stairs at her old school. Just like the moment her mother said, "No one likes a girl who overreacts." But this time, she hadn't fallen, and that changed everything. Noelle clenched her hands tighter. "I'm fine, but I'm not staying quiet anymore." Riley nodded, exhaling like she'd been holding something in for too long. Ava scanned the room. Brandon had disappeared from the dance floor. But the eyes were still on them. Not out of concern, but out of fear that she might do something bigger. And Noelle knew. They were right. Noelle walked out of the gym in silence. Behind her, the music started up again. As if nothing had happened, a few students watched her leave, whispering. A few teachers, standing along the wall, glanced at each other, then turned away. No one called Brandon back. No one touched the microphone to stop the party. Coach Darnell Briggs, the evening shift supervisor, had been standing near the stage. He had seen everything, but he just furrowed his brow, then turned away, slowly walking toward the drink table. Riley hissed through her teeth, "No one's doing anything, seriously. Even the teachers are pretending they didn't see." Ava replied, "Because it's Brandon. Who dare go after Mrs. Keller's son?" Outside in the hallway, Noelle stopped. She turned around and looked back at the gym door, left slightly ajar. Inside, prom carried on. The same people who had smiled at her were now pretending they'd never known her name. Not all of them were bad. Some just didn't want to be involved. Others were simply more used to silence than confrontation. And Noelle realized something important. Silence is a side. She turned away. Each of her footsteps echoed down the hallway. Not because the space was empty, but because in a crowd full of people, she was the only one who hadn't looked away. The next morning, Noelle unlocked her phone to find a message from Tyrese Dalton, a quiet classmate who had filmed a clip at prom. "Hey, just so you know, your clip's going viral." An 8-second video, no audio, just visuals. Brandon shoving, Noelle stumbling, and the crown falling to the ground. The comments below weren't exactly on her side, probably just messing around. People are being dramatic, it's not that serious. She just wants attention, obviously. Noelle read each line, her chest growing colder with every scroll. No one said her name outright, but everyone knew. A few classmates tried to defend her, but their voices were buried beneath hundreds of mocking replies. By noon, she sat quietly in the corner of the cafeteria. Riley and Ava weren't with her. They'd been called to the office. A group of girls walked by, laughing under their breath and shooting glances her way. She was used to being stared at, but today's stares were different. Not pity, not sympathy, surveillance. Her phone buzzed again. A new message. Sender Brandon Keller. Noelle hesitated, then opened it. "Sorry, if you felt offended. It was just pressure. Last night wasn't what you think. Could you maybe not blow this up any further?" Noelle stared at the screen. She didn't reply. She didn't delete it. She just closed her phone and set it down on the table, her eyes fixed on a point no one else could see. Because deep down, she understood something clearly. The world won't wait for her to speak. If she says nothing, it will rewrite the truth without her. That afternoon, Noelle received a second message from Brandon. This time, the joking tone was gone. Just a short sentence. "I'm sorry, I really am." She stared at the screen, her finger scrolling back up to reread the earlier messages, still there. "Sorry if you felt offended. I was under pressure. Last night wasn't what you think." A little while later, a third message came through. "I didn't mean to push you that hard. Honestly, things at home have been rough. My mum's been stressing me out about scholarships. I'm used to being the one who gets picked. When I wasn't, I reacted badly. Noelle read every word. She didn't feel angry. She didn't feel hurt. She just felt empty. Used to being the one who gets picked. That line kept echoing in her mind. Brandon wasn't really apologizing for what he did. He was apologizing because the video had gone viral, because things had gotten out of hand, because she hadn't reacted the way he expected her to. And beneath all the rushed, typed-out justifications, Noelle felt something else. He still thought he was the victim. She set the phone down on the table, didn't reply, didn't delete the messages, didn't post the full video. Not yet. Because sometimes the first reflex of someone who's always stood on top is to try pulling others back down beneath them. But this time, she wasn't beneath him anymore. Monday, lunchtime. Noelle was called to the front office. No explanation. Just a slip of paper slid across her table by the admin assistant. Carter, principal's office, immediately. Dr. Evelyn Monroe's office was bright, clean and quiet, uncomfortably so. She wasn't smiling. She wasn't angry. She simply gestured for Noelle to sit and said gently, "I've seen the video, and I've read some of the student responses. What happened on Friday? It's becoming divisive." Noelle remained silent. Dr. Monroe tilted her head slightly, hands clasped neatly on her desk. "I was wondering if you could help de-escalate the situation." Noelle looked up. "What do you mean, exactly?" "You don't have to say anything, just don't post anything else, don't share further. If you stay quiet, things will settle down." She understood immediately. No one was forcing her to lie, no one was telling her to say she was wrong, but they were trying to buy her silence, in the name of keeping the peace. Dr. Monroe continued, her voice soft as a breeze. "I know you're a good student, and I trust you understand. Sometimes staying quiet is the most mature thing to do." Noelle nodded, polite, calm, but in her mind a different voice rang out. Maturity isn't staying silent just so others feel comfortable. It's knowing when to speak, even when everyone wishes you wouldn't. She walked out of the office, not angry, but for the first time in years, she knew exactly what she was about to become, a name the system could no longer control. That afternoon, Noelle sat alone in the library, the table behind her empty. The table to her right, two students had just pulled their chairs away the moment she sat down. She pretended not to notice, but she saw it, and she remembered. Riley and Ava were currently being held for review over their public online statements. The real reason? They had reposted the full video, with a caption that read, "This is real, don't stay silent." She didn't blame them, she just realized something deeper. When someone stands up first, even their friends can either be pulled into the fire or left behind. That day in English class, she sat in the very back. Mr. Alan Keating didn't mention prom, didn't mention Brandon. But right before the bell rang, he stood up and said, without naming anyone, "Sometimes the cost of speaking isn't backlash, it's the empty space around you in the cafeteria." He glanced toward Noelle subtly, but enough for her to understand. At the end of the day, in the hallway, Ms. Naomi Fields, the school's only young black teacher, stopped by her side. She didn't ask questions. She didn't offer praise. She just said, "I once stayed silent. 11th grade. I know how familiar and terrifying this feeling can be. But you did the right thing, even if no one stands beside you right now." Noelle nodded, eyes burning, but no tears fell. Because she knew. People could turn away. The school could look the other way. Friends could be pushed far from reach. But if she turned her back on herself, then everything silence had ever done to kill her spirit in the past would win. Monday, weekly school assembly. Students stood in orderly rows inside the auditorium, pale fluorescent lights casting a dull glow on sleepy faces. No one expected that today would end any differently from any other Monday. Dr. Evelyn Monroe stepped onto the stage and delivered a few brief announcements. No mention of prom, no mention of Brandon. Then, with a slight nod toward the row of chairs at the side of the stage, a student stepped forward, a sapphire prom dress. The old crown held loosely in one hand. It was Noelle. Whispers spread across the room. A few students glanced at each other. Others pulled out their phones, ready. Noelle approached the microphone at center stage. She set the crown down on the table, didn't wear it, didn't adorn it, just placed it there, like a piece of evidence. She raised her head and looked directly toward the front row, where Dr. Monroe was seated, then turned to face the auditorium. I know, a lot of people were hoping I'd stay silent, because silence makes it easier for everything to stay the same. I used to be like that. I used to stay quiet when I was pushed, mocked, turned into a joke, because no one wanted things to get messy. She paused, not from hesitation, but to let her words land. But some shoves aren't just physical. They're reminders that you're not supposed to be here, that if you're different, you're supposed to keep your head down. She placed her hand gently on the crown. I'm not standing here to reclaim a title. I'm standing here to reclaim the right not to be pushed and remain silent. Below the stage, Brandon Keller sat with his head lowered. No one looked at him, no one patted him on the back. As for Noelle, she stepped away from the microphone without saying another word, because sometimes the bravest thing isn't to scream. It's to speak just loud enough that no one can pretend they didn't hear you. That afternoon, a new announcement appeared on the homepage of Maplewood High. It was brief, formal, no embellishments. The administration hereby states, Maplewood High is committed to fostering a safe learning environment where all students, regardless of background, skin color, or social standing, are treated with respect. The incident at the recent prom was serious. We hereby declare that student Brandon Keller will be suspended for a period of 2 weeks, and a full review of behavioral conduct policies is being initiated within the school. No one said Noelle had won, but everyone understood. For the first time, the school couldn't look away. The next morning, Coach Darnell Briggs passed her in the hallway and gave her a slight nod. No words, just a nod. Mr. Alan Keating stopped by her desk after class and left behind a small folded note. Silence can be survival, but the right words at the right time, that's justice. Brandon didn't show up to school. His friends went quiet. No one defended him. No one spoke on his behalf. Even his mother, Mrs. Margot Keller, stopped appearing at school board fundraisers. There were rumors she had pulled her funding. But the school didn't apologize. And strangely, no one panicked about the lost donations. Instead, parents and some alumni began sending letters of support to Noelle. One email from a stranger read, "My daughter is in 9th grade. And she just said, 'Mom, I want to be like the girl who stood at the microphone this morning.' She didn't need an award. She didn't need an apology from her bully. She only needed one thing: for no one to ever again tell girls like her, staying silent is what's best for you." The following week, Noelle kept going to school as usual. No stage, no certificates, no red carpet. But every time she walked down the hallway, a few eyes still followed her, not with fear, not with pity, but with respect. A 10th grade boy she didn't know nodded at her for the first time in the library. A girl from choir quietly left an empty seat next to her in the lunchroom. No one said anything out loud, but everyone was learning how to stand a little taller, because of someone who had once nearly been pushed down, with no one to catch her. Riley and Ava sat beside her at lunch on Wednesday. Ava leaned in and whispered, repeating the words from before. You didn't need to silence the room by yelling. You just needed to walk in and stay standing. She didn't need anything more. Noelle didn't become an internet icon. No articles were written about her story. But at Maplewood, the place that once tried to quiet her, she had said what needed to be said. And that was enough. Not everyone who speaks loudly is right. Not everyone who stays quiet is wrong. But if you've ever been shoved, ever felt pushed to the edge and left out, remember this: standing your ground is the strongest answer you can give. If you've ever stood in a room where no one stood up for you, if you've ever wanted to speak but were afraid to be alone, comment below, "I choose not to step back." Because somewhere out there, another Noelle might need to know. She's not the only one.